Hannah's Pav. You have to promise me that my father and stepmother aren't allowed to see him, I told Dr. Conway as EMTs started removing Liam from the palace. Tears stained my features, and Liam looked defeated. I explained to him countless times that it was for his good, that he needed that medication if we wanted to keep him alive. He told me that he understood, but I knew the look on his face well. He was hurt that I was having him taken away. It broke my heart to see him like this. I brought it up to Sebastian the night before, and he agreed that if I wanted to keep him alive, it would probably be best if he was surrounded by doctors who knew what they were doing. It pained me to see that he agreed with Queen Magnolia and Dr. Conway, but he also had a good point that I worked at the hospital and could see Liam whenever I wanted. I could make sure that no unwanted visitors were allowed in his room. I promise no one outside of the list you provided will be allowed near him, Dr. Conway assured me. I grasped Liam's hands before he was placed in the ambulance. They didn't trust that he could make it to the hospital without the ambulance, so I agreed to it. I looked at my brother with tear-filled eyes. I promise, I'll be there soon, I told him gently. He gave me a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I watched as they shoved him into the back of the ambulance. As they slammed the doors shut, I flinched at the loud sound, hoping that it didn't frighten Liam. Magnolia stood at the palace entrance, watching the ordeal go down. I could feel her eyes on the back of my head, and I felt a sudden chill going down my spine. I wouldn't dare look at her. I wasn't sure what kind of game she was playing, but she was starting to get on my last nerve. She messed with Sebastian's life a lot, I've noticed during my time at the palace, and now she was starting to mess with mine. What was her game? I decided to brush the thought out of my mind and go to the hospital. I was already late for work, and I didn't have an excuse for Dr. Davis this time. Thankfully, Sebastian sent Louis to return to the palace once he was also dropped off at the hospital to see Emily. Louis was waiting for me at the front of the palace doors, ready to take me to work. I smiled my thanks to him before sliding into the car. I felt a knot forming in my stomach the closer we go to the hospital. For a moment, I couldn't help but worry that my father would be waiting for Liam as soon as he got there. Thankfully, there was no sign of him as we got to the hospital. I went straight to the locker rooms to put on my white work coat and brush my messy hair into a ponytail. Once I was dressed for work, I went straight to Liam's assigned room. I was relieved that he was comfortably in his bed and no longer looked like he wanted to cry. He was hooked up to an IV and was sipping on some water. He beamed up at me as I entered his room. He was 19 years old, which was only a year younger than me, but because of his condition, he acted as if he was still a child. I always made it my mission to care for him when I could. "Hannah," he said happily as I entered the room. "How are you feeling?" I asked him, sitting at his bedside. "I'm sorry you have to be here again." "I'm okay," he said gently, "as long as I get to see you this time." I held onto his hands tightly, not wanting to let him go. "Of course, Liam," I assured him. "I promise that it won't be like last time." After a pause, I added, "But I do have to go to work, so I'll check on you later, okay?" He nodded with a smile. "Okay." I left his room and made my rounds to each of my patients. Dr. Davis has been trusting me to do my rounds myself. He assigned me 5 patients, and each one seemed to be getting better every time I saw them. For a couple of them, I had to adjust the dosages of their medication. I marked down any changes to their conditions and did a bit more test work. My patients were kind to me. One older woman, in particular, could always see when I wasn't okay. "You look like you have a lot on your mind, dear," she said to me, her eyes twinkling with wisdom and compassion. I tried to maintain my professionalism, but she somehow always knew how to bring everything out of me. "It's my brother," I told her after a little while of resistance. "He's here and I'm worried for him." "Well, he has the best doctor in the hospital to care for him. I wouldn't worry too much," she said with a wink. It made me smile. I thanked her before ordering some more tests for her condition and leaving the room. It was nearing mid-afternoon, and I knew it was about time to take a lunch break. I told Dr. Davis I was going to my desk to have some lunch, and he sent for a nurse to check on the testing I had sent to the labs. I sat at my desk, staring at the sandwich I had the kitchen maids at the palace prepare that morning. I wasn't particularly hungry. I decided to do a little more research on Sebastian's condition. I hadn't seen him at all, but Nora could sense that he was around the hospital. I didn't want to bother him and possibly anger him, so I left him alone for the most part. But I still really wanted to do some research to see if there was anything that could be done to ease his discomfort during the full moon. The last full moon was terrible, and I nearly lost my life trying to fight him away. I wasn't sure I could be as lucky this next full moon. I grabbed an empty notebook out of my desk and started jotting down notes. I was startled as a presence appeared behind me. I turned to see Dr. Davis staring down at me with a frown. "More research?" he asked, cocking his head to the side. I thought he was better. I was hesitant before answering. I wasn't sure how much I should tell him. "It worked that time," I told him, "but it won't work every time. It's a temporary fix. I wanted to see if there's something more permanent." "Need some help?" he asked. "There were some more books we didn't check out at the library. I've been kind of curious myself." I rose my gaze to meet his. "You want to help again?" I asked, surprised. He nodded once. "You're one of the best doctors I've had the pleasure of working with," he told me, a small smile creeping on his lips. "It would be a shame if you died at the hands of the beast, especially if there was a way we can stop it." I felt flattered by his compliment, but I thought about how Sebastian acted when I returned home from dinner the other night. I wasn't sure if spending more time outside of the hospital with Dr. Davis was such a good idea. "He'll be angry," Nora warned. She could sense my hesitation. "But we could use as much help as possible. If we explained to Sebastian our intentions, he couldn't possibly be angry," I told her. "Plus, he's so wrapped up with Emily right now, he probably wouldn't notice." However, that's what I said last time too, and he was waiting for me at home angrily. I swallowed the knot forming in my throat. "I hope you know what you are doing," she said uneasily. I looked back up at Dr. Davis and gave him a polite smile. "That would be great, thank you," I said to him. He looked relieved at my response. "Great, we will go to the library after work." Sebastian's POV. "Thank you for being with me, Sebastian," Emily said, peering up at him with sad eyes. Emily has been in the hospital for a few days, and he was trying to do whatever he could for her. He sat at her bedside in a small chair with his leg crossed. He only met her eyes for a moment before turning his gaze to the television across the room. He stayed silent. Nancy had just finished doing a brain scan because Emily had mentioned the severity of her recent headaches. They are waiting for the results from the lab. He was trying to be as patient as he could, but Eric was persistent in getting out of there and seeing Hannah. Even Sebastian was starting to feel guilty for not seeing Hannah as often. But they both knew they couldn't just leave Emily without knowing the results. "I mean it," Emily said, trying to avert his attention back to her. "It means a lot that you're here. You were always there for me growing up," he told her without meeting her eyes. "It's only right that I'm here for you as well." She fell silent, and she stared down at her long, slender fingers. She was thinking about something intently. That much was obvious. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I never left?" She surprised him by asking. He felt more annoyance boiling within him. This wasn't the type of conversation he wanted to have. If he could have it his way, he would just sit there silently and watch the television while they waited for the test results. "No," he told her, uninterested. She sighed and looked defeated for a moment. "I think about it all the time. If I hadn't left the way I did, would we have gotten married?" she asked. He stayed silent for a moment longer. He wasn't sure how to answer her questions. He wasn't even sure if he wanted to answer her question. "What is she thinking?" Eric growled. "She's being ridiculous." Emily was like a little sister to him. It was true that at one point he did see her as something more. He even wanted to marry her for a brief time, but that changed over time, and he no longer sees her like that. "It doesn't matter anymore," he muttered. He didn't owe her a further explanation, and after a long silence, it was obvious she wasn't going to hound him for anything further. "I have to tell you something," she said hesitantly. Her voice trembled nervously, and he finally met her gaze for a moment without saying anything. "I didn't leave because I didn't love you. she told him. "I discovered I was sick before I left to study abroad." "What?" he asked. He squinted his eyes and stared at her questionably. She had told him that she was leaving to study abroad and she no longer wished to be with him. At the time, it hurt him. But he also understood why she wanted to leave. It was out of fear. She feared being around him and couldn't stand to be with someone as hideous and disfigured as he was. He never resented her for it, though, because of all those times she was there for him during his time of need. She was there when his mother died, and he never forgot that. "I didn't think I was going to live this long, but my condition had gotten better," she continued, "until it got worse again. That's why I returned. I felt guilty for how I left things, and I shouldn't have left the way I did. I wanted to make things right with us." He processed all she said before responding. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "Release yourself of that guilt," Sebastian said, keeping his tone even and looking away from her once again. He could feel her eyes still on him. She was confused by what he was saying, despite how direct he was trying to be. "You no longer need to feel guilty for leaving." He further explained. "I understand why you left, and I don't blame you." "You don't?" she asked, her voice soft, and she blinked at him a few times with confusion. Sebastian could tell this wasn't the way she was hoping this conversation would end, but he wasn't sure what else to tell her. He was only there because she was dying, and she needed serious medical attention. As the king, and as an older brother figure, he couldn't just have her deal with something like this by herself. "No," he answered. "Oh," she breathed. She turned away from him and stared up at the television. They stayed silent for a long while. He wasn't sure how long they have waited in the room for Nancy, but he could hear the clock ticking in the background, and his patience was beginning to run short. Before he thought he was going to lose his mind, Nancy came strolling into the room with her clipboard. Sebastian was indifferent to Nancy because of how poorly she treated Hannah. But she was taking care of Emily, so he couldn't be too hard on her. He straightened his stance in his seat and eyed her carefully as she glanced at him nervously. His presence was intimidating, and he was used to those around him tensing and fearing him. "I'm sorry to keep you both waiting," she said, clearing her throat and trying to maintain her professionalism. "The scans have returned and you're experiencing some swelling in your brain, which explains your recent headaches. You've also mentioned that your wolf is gone as well. Is that still correct?" "Yes," Emily said hoarsely. "She's been gone for a long time. I thought it was just hibernation, but I fear it's been far too long and it's far too late. I'm going to take some more blood work. Do you need more medicine for your pain?" Nancy asked. "Yes," Emily said. "I'll send a request right away and get that to you as soon as I can," Nancy assured her. She came around the bed with a large needle and a tube she was going to use to collect Emily's blood. Emily had never been one to enjoy needles and looked away, flinching, as Nancy stuck it into her arm. "These results will arrive probably by later tonight, if not tomorrow," Nancy explained. "We are testing for a couple of different virus options. We won't investigate anything more until we get the results. Have your fevers returned?" "Not yet," Emily answered. "I'm anticipating within the next day or so. It's been over a week since my last serious fever." She glanced up at Sebastian, who had looked at the clock and stood to his feet. "Is there anything more you need from me for tonight?" Sebastian asked them. His tone was formal, as it often was. Nancy looked surprised that he was leaving, and Emily looked saddened, but she shook her head. "No," she answered softly. "Thank you again for being here with me." He nodded to her, and then nodded his thanks to Nancy before turning to the door. "I'll be back in the morning to check on you," he told her over his shoulder. "If anything changes, you have my number." "Yes," both Nancy and Emily said at the same time before he disappeared out the door. As he left the room, the scent of Hannah filled his nose and calmed all his senses. He knew she was nearby, and it was only a matter of time before they ran into one another. He began walking in the direction that Eric was tugging him in. As he rounded the corner, her scent only grew more intense. He stopped as he spotted her at the entrance of the hospital. She was smiling up at that doctor who she was seen in photos with. Sebastian's heart stopped in his chest, and a quick rise of fury rose through him. They were saying something to one another that Sebastian couldn't hear, but he was nearly shaking in his skin. He tightened his jaw and seethed through his teeth. "What the fuck is going on?" Eric hissed, fury rising through him. Before Sebastian had the chance to say anything to his wolf, he watched as the doctor opened the doors to the exit and allowed Hannah to walk through before following her out. "They left?" Eric asked. He was at his boiling point. "Together?" Hannah's POV. "I appreciate that you are helping me with this research," I told Dr. Davis as we sat down at the library. He held a couple of hot cocos in his hand, and he handed me one. "Extra cream, just how you like it," he said with a smile. I couldn't help but laugh and took the drink without hesitation. I have been craving one of these for weeks and was glad to finally have one. As I sipped the drink, I searched for a couple of books I read the last time we were there. I'm sure there's more information that I missed. Dr. Davis grabbed a couple of books that I didn't recognize. He looked at my curious gaze and grinned. "I was curious," he explained. "I think there's something in here we could use." I pulled out my notebook and started taking notes. I glanced over at the book that Dr. Davis was reading. There was a picture of a big, white, and fluffy flower that reminded me of a piece of unbuttered popcorn. "What's that?" I asked, pointing to the flower. "It's beautiful." He looked at the flower and then the description. "It's a jasmine sambac flower," he answered. "It's said to help calm anxiety and help with sleep." "Where can I find something like that?" "That could be useful," I told him. "I'm sure you can get it at the florist," he responded. I nodded and wrote down, "Jasmine sambac flower." He read silently for a little longer, and I could see the wheels turning in his head as he got into the book. He had a timid frown on his face, and I peered over at him, trying to figure out what he was thinking. "What is it?" I asked. "It says that wolf madness could often be psychological," he said. "It stems from pain that is so great that it makes wolves lose their mind. But often the pain isn't actually there. Could that be the case with your wolf king?" I frowned and thought about how when I saw Sebastian's face, there weren't any scars on it. My face reddened at the thought. He was so angry with me when I brought it up to him. He thought I was making fun of him. Could he really believe he was disfigured? What could cause something like that? I asked. He scanned the book a little more. "Magic," he told me, his tone darkening. "But it's unclear as to what kind of magic and who possesses such a thing." I shuddered at the thought of someone or something holding such powerful magic that could make Sebastian, or any wolf for that matter, lose their minds. I didn't want to believe there was something like that in this world. I shook my head, trying to brush the thought out of my mind. "Let's leave that on the back burner for right now," I told him. "Let's just figure out how to help him." He nodded, but he looked uncertain. I continued reading the book I had, ignoring his expression until I started getting annoyed with the look he was giving me. "Can I ask you a question?" he finally asked, sounding almost unsure. I didn't answer, but I looked back up at him with a frown and nodded once. "Why are you with someone like that?" "Excuse me?" I asked, raising my eyebrows. Why was he asking such a question? "Who does he think he is?" Nora asked, sounding offended. I ignored her and continued staring at Dr. Davis. "I'm sorry to be so forward, but you are a sweet and beautiful woman, Hannah. The Wolf King is vicious and could eat you alive. It's an unlikely pair, and I don't see you two ending well together. What made you want to marry him?" he asked. He was serious. I wasn't about to tell him that I was forced to marry Sebastian by my family. I wasn't sure how much I could tell him, but I definitely wasn't going to tell him the truth. I felt a knot forming in my stomach before I answered. Nora was uneasy. "There's more to him than you know," I told him, turning away to look back at my book. That answer didn't seem to satisfy him, and he looked back down at his book with a timid frown. "I would like to just focus on our research if that's all right," I told him, peering over at him. I tried to keep the worried expression off my face, but I didn't want to further the conversation. I felt a familiar presence washing over the library, and my entire body tensed at that moment. Nora perked up as the scent of Sebastian filled our nose. I breathed in his musk and tried not to appear nervous in front of Dr. Davis, but I worried that Sebastian was going to be angry as soon as he saw me. The library was already quiet, but it seemed like the few people that were occupying the library had their breaths held as Sebastian strolled through the aisle and made his way closer to me. I turned slightly, and my eyes widened. His eyes were dark, and through his mask, his face was unreadable. I couldn't tell what he was thinking, but his eyes were locked on Dr. Davis. I noticed he was clenching his fists tightly to his sides, and then unclenching them as he tried hard to maintain his composure. Was he going to lose his cool in the library? It was a public setting, and it wouldn't look good. I stood to my feet quickly, trying to keep my body from trembling violently as he neared me. He stepped in front of me, separating me from Dr. Davis. "Hannah," Sebastian breathed. He kept his tone low, and it sounded oddly calm. I didn't respond to him. I knew I didn't need to respond to him at that moment. "We are going home." Dr. Davis was practically shaking in his skin, the color in his features draining entirely as he locked eyes with Sebastian. I didn't argue with him. I quickly shut my books and brought them back to the shelf. As I walked away, Sebastian pulled his eyes from Dr. Davis so he could watch me. There was a flash of something in his eyes I didn't recognize. He must have been so angry. "He's hurting," Nora whispered. "We hurt him." "We didn't do anything," I said in return. "To him, it seems like we did." As I returned to his side, I gave Dr. Davis an apologetic smile before grabbing the rest of my belongings. I wrapped my arm around Sebastian's arm to keep him close to me. I was hoping my nearness would help keep him calm. He seemed to relax slightly, which made me sigh in relief. He said nothing more as we turned from Dr. Davis and walked out of the library. Lewis was waiting in the car parked out front, and I stopped Sebastian before he got into the car. "Wait," I said to him, trying to halt him. He paused and turned to me, and I saw the scarlet of his eyes peeking through his mask. I shuddered in my skin as I met his gaze. "You aren't to be seen outside the hospital with him again," Sebastian seethed. I dropped my gaze and stared at my feet, my hands falling to my sides. I wasn't going to argue with him, but I wished he understood why I was doing this. I knew he wasn't going to listen to me, though. He didn't care about what I had to say, and my heart tugged painfully knowing that information. "Okay," I told him. "I'm sorry." He turned to go into the car, but I grabbed his arm without thinking much about it. He tensed and shot a look at me. "Hannah," he warned, his voice darkening. I said nothing as I sucked in a sharp breath. I stood on my tippy toes and pressed my lips firmly into his. After a moment of his hesitation and shock, I felt his body relaxing and he kissed me back. Hannah's POV. "Everything is so hot." Nora breathed restlessly. We had only been back at the palace for less than an hour, but ever since I kissed Sebastian outside the library, everything just felt so hot. My entire body felt as if it was on fire. My cheeks were reddened, and I had to keep my legs closed tightly to maintain myself. We were going into heat. That much was obvious. The scent of Sebastian filled me, and I knew he was nearby, but he wasn't in our bedroom. He probably wouldn't give me what I wanted at that moment, which was fine, but I needed to figure out how to calm myself down. "Where is he?" Nora asked, impatiently. Why had he left us? There was only one way she wanted to calm down, but I wasn't going to give in to her temptations. I shook my head without responding to her and threw the blanket over my head, lying down in the bed I shared with Sebastian. It smelled so much like him, it was driving me crazy. I soon sat up as an idea roamed through my mind. I remembered the last time I had gone into heat was the day I saw him with his mask off. His handsome features took me by surprise, and I felt my cheeks redden on the spot. Just the memory was making me blush. Sebastian had me take an ice bath to calm myself down. "Please don't make us do that again," Nora pleaded. We nearly froze to death last time we had to take an ice bath, but I didn't know any other way to calm us down. "It worked, didn't it?" I asked, slipping out of the bed. "Yes, but it was so painful," she whined. "It's better than spending the night in this heat," I told her in return as we made our way towards the bathroom. As we got closer to the bathroom, Sebastian's scent only grew more intense. He must have been in the bathroom. I didn't have the time or patience to wait for him. There were many other bathrooms around the palace, but this bathroom had all my stuff in it already, and it had the biggest bathtub. Also, it was the only bathroom I knew of that had a freezer full of ice. I didn't bother knocking on the door. It's not like Sebastian would give me the same courtesy. As I walked in, I paused immediately when I noticed a broad-chested Sebastian sitting in his own ice bath. My eyes widened and my breathing got caught in my throat. "Oh my," Nora breathed. "He even bathed with his mask on? How was that even remotely comfortable for him?" He acted as though he didn't see me at first, but once he turned to me, he stared me over, a little puzzled that I was standing there. "What are you doing?" he asked, his tone deep and almost husky. I realized I was wearing my thin pajamas and felt embarrassed almost right away, but I remembered that he had seen me fully naked on countless occasions, and he was my husband after all. After we returned from the library, he must have needed to calm himself down as well, and decided to take an ice bath. "I need to take a bath," I told him. I began lifting my nightgown and he turned away. "Can't you see I'm using it? Use a different bathroom," he barked. "I need an ice bath," I told him. I threw my nightgown on the ground and made my way closer to him. He tensed as he looked back at me, scanning me from my eyes and down to my bare toes. "You can't wait?" he asked. There was annoyance in his tone, but he didn't stop me as I climbed into the tub. I shivered as I sat in front of him, covering the top of my breasts with the ice water. I trembled and tried not to look like it was painful. "Why waste the water?" I shivered, trying to lighten the mood. He was at a loss for words, but he didn't make me get out. As cold as the water was, there was something about him being there and close to me that kept my insides feeling warm. It wasn't as painful as it was the last time. Nora was nearly in bliss having him near us, and I knew she no longer resented me for taking an ice bath, though the outside of my body was no longer on fire and my features weren't red and flustered any longer. If anything, I was probably pruning and pale. "I usually do this alone," he muttered. "It's my personal time." He looked away from me, leaning back in the tub. "I was going into heat," I told him. I needed to do something quickly before I lost my mind. I watched as his hands went across his chest, rubbing the water down his biceps and dripping back into the tub. He was a lot calmer than he was at the library, but I found it odd that it didn't seem like the cold of the water was affecting him as it was affecting me. I found the water to be freezing enough to where I could hardly move to clean myself, but to Sebastian, it was like taking a normal bath. He must be used to it. Nora agreed with my inner dialogue as we both admired him. He was so good-looking I was shamefully drooling and hating myself for it. I realized he was staring at me, and my face reddened automatically. He caught me hungrily gazing at him. Why did I feel so embarrassed by that? He was my husband. "Can I ask you something?" I asked, trying to avert his attention away from what was going on. He didn't answer. He stared at me blankly for a moment until I continued speaking. "It's about Emily," I told him. He sighed and looked annoyed. "What about Emily?" he asked. His tone was kept calm. "Were you married to her?" I found myself asking. He didn't seem fazed by the question. "No," he answered. "We were a couple, but we never got to the point of marriage." I must have looked startled because he gave me a lopsided grin that nearly made my heart melt. "I assumed you were because of the media statement," I told him, feeling ridiculous. "The media fabricates their stories," he told me, narrowing his eyes to focus on my expression. "I've told you that." "I know," I said softly, staring down at my hands. My fingertips were already becoming raisins. "You must care for her deeply, though, considering you haven't left her side at the hospital." I hated how stupid I sounded. I wasn't sure where this was coming from. "Hannah, she's an old friend," Sebastian said to me, keeping his eyes locked on me. "She's been there a lot for me growing up. She was there when my mother died, and she never let me grieve alone." I looked up at him, startled by his words. "I had no idea," I told him. It was true. I didn't know she was there during all of that, and I felt even more foolish to sound so jealous. "She's always been like a little sister to me. I owe it to be there for her, just as she was there for me," he explained. His tone was even, but there was a hint of compassion that I wasn't expecting. I met his gaze and I saw there was concern in his eyes as well. He was worried about me being upset. "Are you going to the hospital again tomorrow to see her?" I asked. Tomorrow was my day off, and part of me was hoping we would be able to spend a little time together. Of course, I didn't tell him that. "In the morning," he answered. I hope all is well with her, I told him, and I meant that. I decided that while he spends time with Emily, maybe I'll go to see Liam. I checked on him before leaving work and he seemed well, but I didn't want him to be too lonely. I worried he wasn't getting enough attention at the hospital, and I needed to see for myself that he was okay. I was feeling a lot calmer, and I decided I was done with the ice bath. I wasn't sure how much longer he expected to remain in the tub, but if I stayed any longer, I would surely freeze to death. I stood to my feet and attempted to get out of the tub, but my foot slipped on something, and I felt myself falling almost instantly. The wind got knocked out of my throat, and my heart fell into my stomach as my naked body fell hard and painfully on Sebastian. Sebastian's POV. Everything happened so quickly, Sebastian almost didn't have time to gather himself. Hannah's small and naked figure came towards him quickly. Her wet hair nearly slapped him in the face, and her large eyes grew with fear as she tried to grab the edge of the tub. Sebastian wrapped his arms around her, trying to keep her from hurting herself too badly, but she had already hit her body against the edge of the tub, and she made a piercing sound signifying that she hurt herself. She was breathing heavily as he lifted her, cupping her in his arms, and stepped out of the tub. She peered up at him, her eyes laced with fear and her cheeks reddening with embarrassment. There was a small part of him that felt annoyed. This wouldn't have happened if she had just waited and taken a bath after he was finished. But then there was a larger part of him that felt amused by her clumsiness. He couldn't help this strange warmth he felt from her nearness, and his wolf didn't hate the fact that they were holding her naked body. He grabbed a towel off the counter and wrapped it around her, placing her feet on the ground. She looked shocked about what had just happened. As she tried to gather her thoughts, he watched as her eyes found his. Soon, her gaze was going down his body, and he realized he was completely naked as well. He didn't feel embarrassed. Instead, he rose his eyebrows and gave her a lopsided grin as he grabbed another towel. "Like what you see?" he teased. She pulled her eyes away from him, her face reddening even more. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to fall like that," she murmured. He could practically hear her racing heart, and for some reason, it was affecting him way more than he thought it would. He wanted to laugh and tell her that it was fine, but he was distracted by the guilty feeling his wolf was portraying. "You should be kinder to our chosen mate," Eric muttered. "Stop calling her that," Sebastian said in return. Eric didn't respond, but a guilty feeling came over Sebastian as he thought about all the time he's been spending with Emily, and hardly any with Hannah. Eric didn't need to respond for Sebastian to know that he had already chosen Hannah as their mate long ago, even if he hasn't marked her yet. Typically, a wolf wouldn't be able to choose their own mate without rejecting their fated mates first, unless they have yet to meet their fated mates. Based on Sebastian's knowledge, Hannah hasn't met her fated mate yet. As king, Sebastian didn't need to reject his fated mate before choosing his own mate, but Hannah's wolf could still reject him and refuse him as a mate. He stared at the smooth lining of the nape of her neck, thinking about marking her at that moment. He told her that he wanted to mark her after the full moon, which was only a few days ago, but he couldn't just mark her randomly. He needed to be sure that her wolf wouldn't reject him. He wanted to have a proper ceremony for her. If Hannah continued to grow more upset with him, there wasn't a guarantee that her wolf would accept him as a mate. "You are off from work tomorrow, right?" Sebastian asked before Hannah had the chance to scurry out of the bathroom. She gazed up at him and nodded once. "Yes," she answered. "But you said you were going to see Emily. I figured I'd just go and see Liam." He thought about it for a moment. "I'm going to see her in the morning. We can spend the afternoon together if you'd like," he told her. He tried to keep his voice casual. She looked surprised by his words. "Really?" she asked. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "We can do whatever you want," he told her with a shrug. A sign of eagerness appeared on her face and a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. She was trying hard to contain her excitement. He too was trying to keep the smile off his face. He found her adorable, and his heart was beating rapidly against his chest as he continued to stare at her. "The carnival is in town," she told him. When I was young, my mother used to take Liam and me to the carnival occasionally. It wasn't often, but it was a treat when we got to go. I remembered loving it so much. The carnival? He muttered. Of course, he had heard of the carnival, but he had never been to one. It was something commoners go to, and he never felt the need to attend one himself. He shouldn't have been surprised that the carnival was something Hannah enjoyed. She frowned as she stared around his face. Don't tell me you've never been to a carnival, she said, a smile playing on her lips. You wish for me to lie to you? He asked, narrowing his eyes at her with confusion. She laughed and shook her head. I shouldn't be surprised, she said. You never even eaten at a food cart until that one time. Ah, yes, that sweet and sour chicken they got at the food cart the day the car broke down. He smiled at the memory, remembering how Hannah smiled at him with that loving gaze, something he hadn't seen in a long while. You wish to go to the carnival? He asked. She looked surprised again and stared down at her feet awkwardly. We don't have to, she said softly. It was just a thought. He shook his head with disbelief at her expression as he brushed past her and started heading towards the door. We will go to the carnival after the hospital, he told her over his shoulder. He didn't stick around to hear her response before leaving the bathroom. Hannah's POV. I couldn't believe that Sebastian wanted to go to the carnival. I could hardly contain my excitement. I couldn't even sleep. This is the first normal thing we've done in a long while. He had no issues sleeping, though. He slept soundly from beside me. He kept his arms wrapped around my body and held me tightly as if my presence made it easier for him to sleep. I tried, and failed, to wiggle myself out of his tightened embrace, but eventually I gave up and decided to just sleep. Nora didn't wish to struggle to begin with. She enjoyed his closeness and wanted to be as close to him as possible. The ice bath worked, and I no longer felt like I was in heat, but my insides still burned for him for some reason. A few times I almost lost control of Nora, and I nearly shifted. I had to take in some deep breaths to keep her calm. We arrived at the hospital together the next morning, but once we got through the doors, we separated ways. He went straight to Emily's room, and I went to Liam. Liam looked tired when I entered his room, but as usual, he was excited to see me. Hi, Liam, I said to him as I made my way closer to him. He lifted his head and a small smile appeared on his lips. I'm glad you're here, he said tiredly before lying his head back down. He was looking pale and much thinner than he had the day before. I felt Nora tensing uncomfortably. There was something wrong. How are you feeling? I asked him, nervousness clear in my tone. He was quiet for a moment, and I could tell something was weighing on his mind. Liam? I asked. What's going on? I saw Amy, he whispered. My heart stopped in my chest at his words. She was here. Hannah's POV. Amy? I asked, staring at Liam with shock. Why was she here? What did she want? I knew I was rapid-firing questions at him, and he was too tired to answer me. I felt my blood boiling, and I was beginning to lose control of Nora. She felt this strange intensity and anger surging at the thought of Amy in Liam's room, and I had to try to keep her calm before we made a scene. She said she missed me, and she felt sorry for me, he whispered. There was sadness in his eyes. She told me that you wanted to get rid of me and dump me back at the hospital. She said you didn't care about me. My face lit up with fury, and I clenched my fists, trying hard not to scream. I couldn't lose control here. I just couldn't. This wasn't the time and place, and obviously, Liam was hurting because of her words. My focus had to be on making sure he was okay. Liam, I began softly, sitting at the edge of his bed. You know what she says is lies, don't you? He didn't look certain, but he met my eyes with a sad smile. I was hoping so, he told me. I would never just abandon you, Liam, I assured him. I love you so much. You're my little brother. Throughout everything crazy going on, you're all I truly have. I wouldn't have you here if it wasn't in your best interest. I just feel like I've been feeling worse since coming here, he admitted. I'll have the doctor come and take a look at you, I promised him. I had to get out of there before we completely lost it. He stared at me with concern for a moment before turning away and closing his eyes. I'm tired, he whispered. Get some rest, I said to him through a tightened jaw. I'll call you later, okay? I began to scurry towards the door, my body trembling as I stumbled into the hallway and let out an exaggerated sigh. Nora was getting herself so worked up with not only fury for Amy, but worry for Liam. There was something wrong, and I felt nauseous thinking about it. "What's wrong?" Sebastian said, staring at me from the side. I didn't notice he was standing there, and he scared me. I jumped and straightened my stance. "It's my brother," I told him. "He's not looking well. Amy came to see him." His dark blue gaze darkened even more as he stared at me, processing what I had just said. "Your family wasn't supposed to be allowed to see him," Sebastian barked. Of course, I knew that. She must have gotten there early enough that nobody noticed her walking in. I didn't say anything, though. I took in a couple of deeper breaths to keep my wolf calm. We went to Dr. Davis, who looked surprised to see me, and once his eyes found Sebastian, the color in his face drained, reminding me how he looked in the library the night before. I told him about Liam and asked if he could check on him when he got the chance. He agreed and gave me a reassuring smile before Sebastian, and I left the hospital. The carnival was exactly what we needed. It was a sunny and warm day, perfect to spend the day outside. It was already crowded, and the energy was comforting. There were wandering gazes as we made our way through the crowds and walked around the park. I don't think anybody was expecting to see their king at something so simple. I had to stifle a laugh as their shocked expressions were obvious. Sebastian looked completely out of his element, and he looked around like he had never seen anything quite as ridiculous. "At least look like you're having a good time," I teased as we continued walking through the crowds. He glanced at me sideways. "I'm trying," he said in return. "It's just so basic." I had to bite my lower lip to stifle another laugh. A vendor was seen in the distance. I saw the giant pink and blue sign that read, "Cotton Candy." I couldn't keep the excitement off my face as I grabbed onto Sebastian's arm and pulled him towards the vendor. He was resistant for a moment, but then eventually followed closely behind me. I greeted the vendor, who couldn't keep his eyes off Sebastian. They were large and frightened of the wolf king that stood before him. I tried to avert the vendor's attention back to me with a polite smile. "May I get one cotton candy, please?" I asked, trying to keep my voice sweet and unbothered. He finally pulled his eyes from Sebastian and nodded to me. He handed me a cotton candy stick. I thanked him, and we went on our way. Sebastian was staring at the sugary sweet with dismay on his face that I laughed out loud. "Try it," I chuckled, holding it up to him. He was hesitant but did as I suggested. As he placed a blue fluff of cotton candy in his mouth, I saw his eyes widen. Something crossed his face that I didn't recognize, but he didn't look displeased. He looked more uncertain than anything. "You like it, don't you?" I said jokingly. He cleared his throat and continued walking. "It's too sweet," he muttered, but there was a bit of humor lacing his tone that made me laugh even harder. He looked relieved to see me laughing, and I wondered where that feeling of his was coming from. We ate some more food during our time at the carnival, some of which he openly admitted to enjoying. We shopped at some of the street vendors. I was able to get some cool, unique jewelry, which he said was tacky. I even got some clothes that I found adorable, but as I tried them on, he stared at me blankly, and then confusion crossed his face. "You can have all the clothing in the world at the most high-end boutiques, but you choose a $5 blouse that will shrink in the wash and won't last a month," he said, shaking his head with disbelief. "That's not the point," I said to him as I paid the vendor. "It's called a souvenir. It's something I couldn't get a lot of growing up." My voice trailed off as I thought about how my mother would try to get us whatever we wanted the times we went to the carnival, but she never had enough money for everything. I always felt guilty for putting so much pressure on her, even though I knew everything she was going through. I didn't realize Sebastian was staring at me. He was measuring the hurt expression across my face and wondering if he had said something to offend me. "I didn't mean it like that," he finally said after a breath of silence. "I'm sorry," I told him. "It's not you." There was innocence that flashed through his eyes that tugged at my heart. I was hoping I didn't hurt him, but then his gaze broke from mine, and he looked over at the Ferris wheel. "What is that?" he asked. I smiled and grabbed his arm to pull him towards the ride. Neither of us said anything. As we reached the ride, and sat side by side. He looked uncomfortable, but not as uncomfortable as the man felt when he buckled Sebastian and me in. Sebastian just looked confused, but then startled when the ride began moving and we started being lifted into the air. He looked around wildly for a few moments before relaxing in the seat. We were able to get a whole view of the park. It was beautiful and peaceful, and I finally felt calm after the morning I had. Sebastian was calm from beside me as well, and I saw a faint smile on his lips as he looked around. Was he having fun? I gazed up at him, peering through my lashes. "It's nice, isn't it?" I asked him. He said nothing for a moment, but then nodded. "Yes, I have to admit, it is nice," he said, mimicking my soft tone. "I'm sorry if I was giving you such a hard time today." I was surprised that he was apologizing to me. I kept gazing up at him. "I understand," I told him. "You are out of your element. I appreciate you for trying." He was quiet for another moment longer. "Next time, we can bring your brother," he shocked me by saying. I felt my heart leaping into my throat, and Nora was practically jumping from my body. The feeling was surreal, and I had to blink away the tears that formed in my eyes. Before I could say anything more, my eyes scanned the crowd below as the ride started lowering us. My heart stopped once again, and my breathing got caught in my throat as I stared at the one person I didn't wish to see at that moment. The one person who was staring directly at me as the ride came to a halt. Amy's POV. It was like pulling teeth getting Lucas to the carnival. He protested loudly and called Amy childish for suggesting such a thing. She flinched as it looked like he was about to smack her. He hadn't touched her since that time at the auction, but she feared that he would lose again. He had a temper that sent a chill down her spine, but he was good-looking and rich. He would get her what she wanted. At least he would get her closer to what she wanted than Thomas would. For Lucas, Amy got him what he wanted as well, a chance to be the next alpha after her father passes down the title. That's all anybody ever wanted when they were with Amy. It made her almost doubt genuine love. It didn't matter, though. She never had any intentions of marrying Lucas. Not that he knew that. Her eyes were set on the prince. Of course, they had never officially met before. She only saw his picture in magazines and heard the queen speaking highly of him. But he was destined to be the next Alpha King, and Amy was determined to be his Luna. But until then, she had to stick by Lucas's side, even if he made her miserable. She couldn't let Hannah win. It seemed like everything was falling into place so easily for Hannah, and it wasn't fair. As time passes, Lucas didn't want to do anything at the carnival. It was aggravating because a few times, Amy saw Hannah walking around with her beloved Wolf King. It made Amy sick to watch them engross in one another. Hannah was laughing and having the time of her life, and even the Wolf King looked like he was enjoying himself. "Can we leave now?" Lucas complained. "This is stupid, and I have things to do." Amy rolled her eyes and scanned the crowd. She had lost sight of Hannah. It was probably for the best. She wasn't sure why she was watching her so intently. It didn't matter where Hannah was or what she was doing. As they continued walking through the crowd, her wolf stirred from within her. They could feel the presence of Hannah somewhere nearby. Her gaze lifted, and she spotted Hannah on the Ferris wheel beside the Wolf King. They were both smiling at one another and looking so in love. It was making Amy feel sick. Soon, Hannah's gaze shifted from her Wolf King, and she was scanning the crowd until her gaze found Amy's. Hannah's POV. My wolf stirred angrily as I stared at Amy. The ride came to a halt, and the man that initially strapped us in came to unbuckle us. Sebastian could sense my tension and followed my gaze to see my sister. "What is she doing here?" I growled. Sebastian helped me out of my seat and stayed close to my side. "We should get going," he whispered from beside me. I could tell he wasn't happy to see her either, but he didn't want to cause a scene around the carnival. There were too many onlookers. I agreed with him, despite Nora's protest, and we started walking past Amy, but her mumbling stopped me. "Bitch!" she muttered. "Excuse me?" I asked, making her turn around to face me. "I can see right through you," Amy said, folding her arms across her chest. "You aren't fooling me." "What did you say to my brother, Amy?" I asked. I could hear my voice rising, and some others were stopping to look in our direction. Sebastian was tensing from beside me. I told him the truth, Amy said. There was humor dancing in her eyes. I scowled at her, taking a step closer. My wolf couldn't handle it anymore. She was about to attack. I went to say something more to her, but I felt Sebastian's soft fingers grabbing my arm. It was like a calming sensation, an electrifying pulse that was sent through my body, freezing me in my place. Nora was instantly calming and did a small leap at the first contact. I took in a deep breath, calming my body as I turned to Sebastian. He was staring down at me with concern in his eyes. I had never seen him acting so calm before. It was probably because we were in public, and he had an image to maintain. He was the alpha king, after all. He couldn't lose control in front of everybody, and he certainly didn't want his Luna to lose control as well. He didn't have to say anything for me to follow him. Amy said some more words from behind me, but Sebastian had me in such a trance that I couldn't hear her or think of anything else. I was secretly thankful that he was there with me. After the carnival, we had gotten some dinner in the kingdom, real food as Sebastian referred to it as. I had to admit that it was delicious food, and it was nice eating something that wasn't so sugary. Once we finished eating dinner, we returned home to the palace. Home. The word I started using to refer to the palace as. It once felt so foreign to me. This palace didn't feel like my home, but it was starting to feel more like my home than my original pack house where my family lived. There was nothing in this palace that was remotely mine, though, other than the small belongings that I brought with me when I moved here. I didn't have much to begin with. The decorations were a bit bland in our shared bedroom, and even the living quarters lacked the female touch despite Queen Magnolia living here as well. At one point, he told me I could decorate if I wanted to, but I didn't feel comfortable doing it at that time. But maybe now that I was starting to warm up to the idea of this place being my home, it wouldn't hurt to buy a couple of things to lighten up the area and make it more my own. I had another day off tomorrow. Sebastian told me he was going to spend the day with Emily. I figured that would be a great time to go shopping. Are you going to be okay here today? Sebastian asked me the next morning before he left for the day. I nodded and smiled up at him. Yes, I told him. Enjoy your day, and I'll see you later. He kissed the top of my head before leaving, and I felt my heart skipping a beat. Why was he having this effect on me suddenly? It wasn't making sense. It's not like he was my fated mate. He hasn't even marked me as his yet. I couldn't wipe the nerdy grin off my face as I watched him leave. Nora was feeling upset by his departure, and I couldn't blame her. She hated that he was spending so much time with Emily. Even though we spent the entire day together yesterday, it still didn't feel like enough time. I brushed the thought out of my head, trying to calm down her anxieties. I made a mental note to call Liam later to make sure he was okay. My encounter with Amy yesterday still didn't sit right with me, and I worried Liam was getting caught in the crossfire. I went to find Caroline, who was finishing doing some laundry for the morning. I asked if she could accompany me shopping in the afternoon. She looked surprised at my question. I don't have any friends, I told her, embarrassed. It would be nice to have some company. She laughed and agreed. We shopped for most of the afternoon for random household things we both thought would lighten up the palace. We even went to a couple of clothing stores. I offered to buy Caroline some new clothes, but she declined to say that it was against the rules to wear clothes that weren't part of her uniform. Don't you take days off? I asked her, frowning. Now that I was thinking about it, I don't think she has ever taken a day off since I arrived. She shook her head. No, she told me. Not a traditional one, at least. Only if we have no duties. But even still, we are to remain in the palace. I felt sad for her. I felt like we were keeping slaves, and my heart tugged painfully. She changed the subject quickly when she saw a couple of pajamas. They were his and her. Pajamas, and she laughed at the idea of the king and I wearing matching PJs to bed. So I bought them, Sebastian's POV. It was a long day at the hospital, and Sebastian was exhausted when he returned home to the palace. Emily's fever had returned, and she spent the day miserable in cold shivers and hot flashes of sweats. He was annoyed at the fact that no matter what Nancy seemed to do, it never was enough, and it didn't make Emily feel any better. She lay helpless in the hospital bed, crying that she was in so much pain. She kept grabbing at him to hold her, and he kept refusing her. She was almost desperate for his physical touch. He might have thought of her as a little sister, but that's all she was, and she needed to remember that. He thought of taking a shower upon returning to the palace. The last thing he wanted was for Hannah to smell the scent of Emily lingering on his clothes, even though he knew nothing happened between them. But he was too tired to even find his way to the bathroom. He yawned and ignored the bowing servants as he walked through the foyer. He made his way up the stairs where his wolf picked up the scent of Hannah. It made him smile, having her scent so close to him. Before he entered his room, he knew that she is sleeping soundly in their bed. He couldn't wait to wrap his arms around her and nuzzle his nose in her hair, taking in all her scents. It was the only way he could fall asleep. He might even steal a few kisses from her while she slept. He grew accustomed to kissing her while she slept because for a long while, he didn't think she would willingly kiss him while awake. Hannah was tucked away, as predicted, in their bed, sleeping peacefully. But something was a little different about her. He frowned as he stared at her covered body and realized she was wearing a different pair of pajamas. He wanted to laugh at how covered she was. He was used to her wearing a skinny nightgown to bed, but this was an actual pajama top with matching bottoms, fleece. He shook his head with dismay before peering beside her on his side of the bed. Another set of pajamas that matched Hannah's, only they were bigger. His eyes widened for a moment as he realized she got him the same pajamas. "Matching pajamas?" he muttered, staring at the fleece fabric that occupied his side of the bed. He brushed his fingers through his hair and shook his head. What was she thinking? Does she expect me to wear these? He put the pajamas on his bedside table before taking his shirt off and slipping beside her into bed. She subconsciously felt him beside her and sleepily snuggled against him as he wrapped his arms around her. The pajamas against his body were soft, and the scent of her hair made its way through his nose. He took in her scent and felt his body relaxing after a long day. As he held her close, he looked around the room. There was something else different around here. He soon realized there were new items around his room. A couple of pictures that were hung, a new curtain that he didn't particularly hate, a couple of new items and books on his shelves, and a new lamp on her bedside. She decorated? He wondered what else she had gotten for the palace. He suddenly felt a warm wave rushing through him as he realized she was finding some comfort in calling the palace home. She was making it her home. A smile tugged at his lips as he held her close. "The pajamas feel nice," he whispered, knowing she couldn't hear him while she slept. He turned and stared at the PJs he put aside. He sighed as he got out of bed. He reluctantly put the pajamas on before slipping back into bed and falling asleep beside his chosen mate. Hannah's POV. I woke up feeling well rested. I couldn't remember the last time I slept so well. I yawned and rubbed my eyes, wondering how long I had slept. It was weird that I wasn't being woken early, as I usually would be by either Sebastian or Caroline. The sun was peering through the new curtains I had gotten for the window, giving the room a slight red tint. Sebastian slept soundly beside me, and I was relieved that he was there. That meant he didn't get up early to see Emily. My eyes widened as I noticed he was wearing the pajamas I got him. I felt my wolf leaping in my chest, and I wanted to burst out into giggles. I don't know why that made me so happy, but as soon as I was happy, the soon that my heart fell into my stomach. His scent was off. I could tell he didn't shower from last night. It didn't usually matter. Nora found his scent intoxicating usually, regardless of how musky it can be. I typically found his scent calming, and it sends a warmth through his body. But this time it smelled wrong. It smelled like someone else. I got closer to him, and he stirred in his sleep, reaching for me as I pulled away from him. Nora was growing upset by the new scent. As new as it was for him, it also smelled a little familiar. Sebastian opened his eyes and yawned, gazing up at me with a sleepy expression through his mask. I couldn't believe he slept with his mask on, but I was used to it by now. His dark blue eyes scanned my face, and he sat up, looking over at the clock with confusion in his gaze. "Did we oversleep?" he asked. "You aren't usually awake before me." "Who do you smell like?" I heard myself asking. He looked back at me, a frown on his lips. "I was with Emily last night," he told me, keeping his tone even. "I didn't shower when I got home." My heart tugged again, but this time it was more painful. I clenched my fists. "She broke out into a fever," Sebastian explained, still frowning and gazing around my face. "She got a lot of sweat on me. I can shower if you want." "Don't bother," I muttered, sliding out of bed. I knew it wasn't his fault that he smelled like her, but it was upsetting my wolf, and I couldn't help but feel a bit intimidated. He was supposed to be choosing me as a mate, and he hasn't even marked me yet. Now his ex was around, and he was spending all this time with her. I understood that he thought of her as a little sister, and he owed her a lot. But still, it irked me. She was still his ex, and she was still all over him. Now he was coming home and smelling disgustingly like her. I couldn't help but feel upset over the ordeal. "Hannah?" he asked, confused as I stood from the bed. "Don't you have to go back to the hospital?" I asked, folding my arms across my chest. "I must go to work anyways, so I should be leaving too." He looked uncertain for a long while, but he nodded and slid out of bed as well. "Are you upset?" he asked. "Upset?" I repeated, trying not to raise my tone. "Why would I be upset? Because your ex is all over you all the time." "She's not all over me. She's sick. I'm just taking care of her." "I've already explained this to you," he shot back. I could tell he was starting to get aggravated. The nice wolf routine he was showing me these last few days was starting to break. "Did she see you with your mask off?" I asked, trying and failing to keep the hurt from my tone. "What?" he snarled. I could tell I struck a chord. His eyes were growing scarlet, and for a moment it didn't look like he was there anymore. His wolf was taking over. I wasn't going to be afraid of him this time, though. I stood my ground and kept my eyes locked on his. I wanted to know the truth. "What the fuck, Hannah?" he hissed. "Answer the question, Sebastian," I said. I wasn't sure where this wave of confidence was coming from. "No," he growled his response. "You're being stupid." "Am I, though?" I asked, pressing my lips in a firm line. "I'm leaving," he muttered as he threw on some new clothes from his drawers. "This conversation needs to end here before I show you the exact reason everyone fears me." He slammed the door behind him as he left, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my wide eyes. Hannah's POV. I hated fighting with Sebastian. It left me feeling empty on the inside, and my wolf was numb. She wanted us to apologize for overreacting. I wasn't sure what came over me all of a sudden, but at that moment, all I could see was red. I shuddered at the memory of the morning and tried to brush it out of my head. I was at work now, and I had a job to do. My patients weren't going to cure themselves. Thankfully, Liam was looking a little better than he had the morning before. So, that was one less thing I had to stress about. A couple of my patients could tell something was bothering me and tried to get it out of me. I played it off with a chuckle and kept my mouth closed, though. I didn't want to talk about my relationship problems with my patients. I needed to stay professional. I had to remember that I wasn't just an intern, but I was also the Luna Queen. That title still didn't feel right to me. I didn't feel like a queen. In fact, Queen Magnolia still felt like the Luna Queen, even though I knew she was technically stripped from that title when Sebastian became the Alpha King. What I really wanted at that moment was to find Sebastian and tell him that I'm sorry. I wondered if he was still angry at me. I could smell him in the hospital, so I knew he wasn't far from me. I went to my desk before stopping by Emily's room. I needed to drop off some of my paperwork and plug some information into my computer to update my patient's database. Nancy was peering over at me from her desk, her small eyes darkening and a grin spreading across her face. I got a chill as I met her eyes. I wanted to ask what she was staring at, but I chose not to speak and looked away. It didn't matter, she spoke anyway. "Seems my patient and your husband are getting quite close," she cooed, a twinkle in her eyes. I felt Nora's surge of anger, and I had to stifle a growl before I ripped her head from her shoulders. "Easy, girl," I reminded my wolf. Nancy laughed at my expression. "If I were you, I wouldn't take my eyes off him too long," she said, batting her lashes at me. "It'd be a shame if someone stole him from under your nose. I would know exactly what that felt like." She flipped her hair as she brushed past me. What did that even mean? Was she referring to Dr. Davis? I shuddered at the thought. I knew she had a thing for Dr. Davis, but I didn't want anyone to think anything was going on between us. He was my colleague, my trainer, my boss. I shook my head to brush the thought from my mind as I finished updating the database. I needed to find Sebastian. I couldn't let what Nancy said bother me, and I certainly didn't believe that Emily was going to take him away from me. Even though he hasn't marked me as his yet, he still chose me as his mate. He married me already. He already proved that it was me he wanted, and not Emily. What more did I expect from him? I was being selfish, and I needed him to know how sorry I was. I went to Emily's room and was glad that Nancy was nowhere in sight. I felt relief flooding through me as Sebastian's scent filled my nose, calming my wolf and all our senses. I breathed in deeply as I pushed her door open. Emily was talking in a low tone, and it almost sounded seductive. I couldn't see Sebastian's face because he had his back turned from me, but he was close to her. Too close to her. I felt a rush of anger flashing through me, and my features lit up with heat as I stared at them. I saw Emily's delicate and long fingers touching Sebastian's bicep, and I almost gave in to Nora and released her right then and there. I was about to rip her throat out. I rushed towards them in time for Sebastian to move his arm so her hand would fall from him. Emily saw me rushing toward them, and her eyes widened with shock. I spoke before she even had the chance. "Get your hands off my husband," I hissed to her. More force came through my words than intended. Sebastian didn't look shocked to see me. I imagine he probably sensed me right away. I had to remember that I wasn't there to yell at him, but apologize. But she made me so angry I couldn't help myself. "What is she doing in here?" Emily shouted, panic crossing her face. "She isn't allowed in here." "Hannah," Sebastian warned, his eyes turning dark as he stared at me. "You shouldn't be here." Was he seriously defending her? After everything? I paused in my tracks and stared up at him. I hope my expression didn't look as hurt as I felt. "Are you seriously going to let her touch you?" I asked, my voice sounding high-pitched. "I had it under control," he murmured, trying to keep Emily from hearing us. "I don't want her here," Emily cried out, loud enough for someone walking by the halls to hear. Tears sprang from her eyes, and I could see beads of sweat forming on her forehead. Either she was a great actress, or she really was terrified of having me around. "Please, get her out!" she cried again. Sebastian turned back to me. His eyes were unreadable. "You need to leave now," he warned, his tone darkening as he addressed me. I was at a loss of words. Nora was weeping from inside me, and I wanted to fall to the ground and start crying. But I couldn't let them see that kind of weakness. I sucked in a breath and kept my gaze locked on his. "Sebastian." I tried to defend myself. He shot his hand up quickly to silence me as if I was one of his servants. My breath got caught in my throat, and I stared at him with dismay. Before he had the chance to say anything more, I turned away and ran from the room. I couldn't let him see me crying. Sebastian's POV. The hurt look Hannah gave Sebastian was torture to both Sebastian and his wolf. Eric kept hounding him to go after her, but Sebastian knew he couldn't. He had to take care of Emily, regardless of how ridiculous she was being. All he knew at that moment was that he needed to get Hannah out of there before she lost control. Before Emily caused a big enough scene to gather attention and get Hannah in trouble. Emily had requested that Hannah wasn't allowed in her room, and Nancy was always lurking around and waiting to get Hannah in trouble. He wasn't about to allow this to turn into ammunition for them to use against Hannah. He knew Hannah would be waiting for him once he returned home, and he would explain all that to her later. He turned to Emily, his eyes darkening and fury boiling inside of him. His wolf was not happy and was threatening to take over. He wanted more than anything to rip Emily apart for what she had said and done to their chosen mate. But he had to keep his calm, regardless of how furious he was. "Why did you do that?" Sebastian asked, trying to keep his voice calm. She looked surprised by his question. "She makes me uncomfortable," she said, her tears were magically disappearing. "I didn't want her here." "You didn't need to do all that, Emily," Sebastian said. "And she's right. You need to stop touching me. I'm not yours to touch." "You aren't hers either," Emily snapped back. "Last I checked, she wasn't your mate. She's my Luna." Sebastian growled, "My chosen mate." It was the first time he had admitted that out loud. Those words felt foreign on his lips, but he didn't hate it. Emily gasped as she looked around his masked face, trying to see if he was telling the truth. This was the first she was hearing about this, and he knew it would hurt her to hear that he had chosen Hannah to be his mate. "Chosen mate?" she repeated, her eyes welling up with tears. "You need to respect me and my Luna, Emily. I'm serious. You might be like a sister to me, but I won't allow you to come between Hannah and me." He growled, "This is your last warning. Don't make me speak to you about this again." Hannah's POV. It felt like the last couple of days with Sebastian meant nothing to him. "I thought we were finally making progress with our relationship, but it must have just been me." I kept my head down, trying not to cry in front of my colleagues and patients. The time couldn't have passed quickly enough. But as soon as it was time to leave, I was out the door. I allowed Nora loose as we ran through the kingdom and towards the palace. Louis was waiting outside of the hospital, but I didn't want to ride home with Sebastian. I wanted to be alone with my wolf for a little while. I allowed her to feed before we returned to the palace. We felt stronger than ever, and I felt a wave of energy coursing through me. I was surprised that Sebastian hadn't returned yet, but I tried not to seem too bothered as I entered the foyer. I was greeted by the butler who bowed at my presence. I was never going to get used to that. A couple of servants also stopped to bow at me as well, and I felt my face flushing from embarrassment. "Good evening, Your Majesty," Caroline said with a smile as she walked toward me. "You must be hungry. I have dinner prepared for you in the dining hall." "Thanks," I said to her. "I'll eat a little later," I told her as I walked towards the grand stairs. My wolf had just fed, and I personally wasn't feeling well enough to eat. I knew she was worried because I felt her eyes lingering on me as I walked away. But I was too exhausted from the day to give her a proper explanation. I made my way towards the bedroom and laid down on the bed. I sighed out the stresses of the day, and I felt Nora growing antsy with anticipation for Sebastian to return. I tried to calm her down, telling her that Sebastian doesn't care that much about us returning home early, but she didn't believe me. His scent from that morning still lingered in the room. I still smelled a little bit of Emily, and it was infuriating. I wanted to run away and scream or something, but I had to keep my calm. I couldn't lose control of Nora. I stared over at his bedside table and frowned as I realized he was a bit different than mine. They were both rustic antiques with smoky-colored wood and gorgeous decals, but his had a little golden lock on it. I tilted my head as I stared at the lock. What's he keeping in there? I wondered to myself. I slid over to his side of the bed and tried to open it, but of course I couldn't because it was locked. That rose suspicion with not only me but with Nora as well. She didn't like that he was keeping something from us, and I felt uneasy wondering what it could be. I felt around the bedside table. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I would know it once I found it. My fingers felt around the undercarriage of the table until it hit something small and smooth. I tugged at it and heard a ripping sound. It was tape. I pulled it more to release whatever it was holding, and a key fell into the palm of my hands. I stared at the key with dismay for a long while. I thought about opening the drawer, but if Sebastian found out, he would be so angry with me. There was this nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach that told me I had to find out what was in this drawer. I couldn't smell him nearby, so I knew I had some time before he returned home. I slid the key into the keyhole and unlatched the lock, pulling the drawer open. I gasped when I saw what was inside. It looked like a thin black wand with a dark blue crystal-type ball on top of it. The black wand had leaf-like decals that expanded out, reminding me of wings, and a part of it stemmed around the blue crystal, holding it into place. Upon touching it, I felt a surge of energy going through the palm of my hand. It almost felt like an electrifying shock, and it startled me enough to drop the wand back into the drawer. I stared at my hand and saw a small, reddened mark on my palm as if it had just burned me. "What the hell is that?" I said out loud, shocked at what had happened. Nora felt uncertain, and she was worried as well. I knew she wanted me to shut the drawer, but I couldn't keep my eyes off the wand. I grabbed my phone, which was charging on the nightstand, and took a couple of pictures. I soon closed the drawer and locked it, placing the key back where I found it before Sebastian returned home. I shuddered as I remembered the weird feeling the wand gave me. I went over to my laptop, which sat on the little desk in the corner of the room, and started typing the description of the wand in Google. I stared as the description was bold on my face. A moonstone scepter. It was known to be one of the most powerful things this planet had ever had. I gasped as I realized how much power I held only moments ago. No wonder it hurt to touch. I said to myself as I stared down at my hand, "It is said that the moon goddess is the only one powerful enough to hold such a scepter and to use it properly. She's the rightful owner of this scepter." So, what was it doing at Sebastian's bedside table? I decided to click out of it quickly before Sebastian returned home. I wasn't sure I wanted to know the truth. It's not like I could just ask him about it. It would only anger him anyway. But I couldn't help but wonder if it had anything to do with his scars. While I had my computer open, I decided to do a little more research on the wolf madness. I grabbed my notebook nearby and began taking some small notes. I wasn't sure how long I was researching, but I felt a wave of tiredness after a while. I found it hard to keep my eyes open. Sebastian's POV. Sebastian returned home, and he could already smell Hannah all over the palace. He sighed relief, knowing she was there. He was determined to talk to her about what happened at the hospital. He didn't want her to think he was angry with her or choosing Emily over her. That wasn't the case at all, but with the hurt expression on Hannah's face, he knew she was getting the wrong idea. Caroline greeted him at the door with a curtsy, and she looked a bit worried. He said nothing to her, but he stared at her until she started speaking. "Good evening, Your Majesty. Dinner is prepared in the dining hall," she said softly. "The Luna Queen hasn't eaten yet. She said she would eat later, but she hasn't come down." "She hasn't eaten?" Sebastian asked, his voice rising, making Caroline tense. Caroline nodded once, confirming, her body visibly trembling. Without saying anything more, Sebastian rushed past her and towards the grand stairs. Eric was getting wound up wondering why Hannah chose not to eat when she returned home. It wasn't like her to skip a meal. Had they upset her so much that she's starving herself? He barged into their bedroom, his heart racing at a lightning speed. He paused as he saw Hannah bent over her laptop with her eyes closed. He rushed towards her until Eric stopped him. "She's sleeping," Eric informed him. "She must be exhausted from today." He was right. Hannah was sleeping soundly at her computer. He sighed relief knowing that she was okay. Their conversation would have to wait until the morning. He went to lift her to place her into bed when he saw some familiar words on her laptop screen. He paused as he read the laptop. "Wolf madness?" he said to his wolf, raising his eyebrows. He scrolled through her computer for a moment, realizing that she was researching ways to cure and tame his wolf madness. He stared at the sleeping woman with admiration filling his mind. A smile tugged at his lips. He couldn't believe what he was seeing in front of him. Then he saw her notebook. "She's been researching ways to help us," Eric breathed. Hannah's POV. It felt like the last couple of days with Sebastian meant nothing to him. "I thought we were finally making progress with our relationship, but it must have just been me." I kept my head down, trying not to cry in front of my colleagues and patients. The time couldn't have passed quickly enough. But as soon as it was time to leave, I was out the door. I allowed Nora loose as we ran through the kingdom and towards the palace. Louis was waiting outside of the hospital, but I didn't want to ride home with Sebastian. I wanted to be alone with my wolf for a little while. I allowed her to feed before we returned to the palace. We felt stronger than ever, and I felt a wave of energy coursing through me. I was surprised that Sebastian hadn't returned yet, but I tried not to seem too bothered as I entered the foyer. I was greeted by the butler who bowed at my presence. I was never going to get used to that. A couple of servants also stopped to bow at me as well, and I felt my face flushing from embarrassment. "Good evening, Your Majesty," Caroline said with a smile as she walked toward me. "You must be hungry. I have dinner prepared for you in the dining hall." "Thanks," I said to her. "I'll eat a little later," I told her as I walked towards the grand stairs. My wolf had just fed, and I personally wasn't feeling well enough to eat. I knew she was worried because I felt her eyes lingering on me as I walked away. But I was too exhausted from the day to give her a proper explanation. I made my way towards the bedroom and laid down on the bed. I sighed out the stresses of the day, and I felt Nora growing antsy with anticipation for Sebastian to return. I tried to calm her down, telling her that Sebastian doesn't care that much about us returning home early, but she didn't believe me. His scent from that morning still lingered in the room. I still smelled a little bit of Emily, and it was infuriating. I wanted to run away and scream or something, but I had to keep my calm. I couldn't lose control of Nora. I stared over at his bedside table and frowned as I realized he was a bit different than mine. They were both rustic antiques with smoky-colored wood and gorgeous decals, but his had a little golden lock on it. I tilted my head as I stared at the lock. What's he keeping in there? I wondered to myself. I slid over to his side of the bed and tried to open it, but of course I couldn't because it was locked. That rose suspicion with not only me but with Nora as well. She didn't like that he was keeping something from us, and I felt uneasy wondering what it could be. I felt around the bedside table. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I would know it once I found it. My fingers felt around the undercarriage of the table until it hit something small and smooth. I tugged at it and heard a ripping sound. It was tape. I pulled it more to release whatever it was holding, and a key fell into the palm of my hands. I stared at the key with dismay for a long while. I thought about opening the drawer, but if Sebastian found out, he would be so angry with me. There was this nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach that told me I had to find out what was in this drawer. I couldn't smell him nearby, so I knew I had some time before he returned home. I slid the key into the keyhole and unlatched the lock, pulling the drawer open. I gasped when I saw what was inside. It looked like a thin black wand with a dark blue crystal-type ball on top of it. The black wand had leaf-like decals that expanded out, reminding me of wings, and a part of it stemmed around the blue crystal, holding it into place. Upon touching it, I felt a surge of energy going through the palm of my hand. It almost felt like an electrifying shock, and it startled me enough to drop the wand back into the drawer. I stared at my hand and saw a small, reddened mark on my palm as if it had just burned me. "What the hell is that?" I said out loud, shocked at what had happened. Nora felt uncertain, and she was worried as well. I knew she wanted me to shut the drawer, but I couldn't keep my eyes off the wand. I grabbed my phone, which was charging on the nightstand, and took a couple of pictures. I soon closed the drawer and locked it, placing the key back where I found it before Sebastian returned home. I shuddered as I remembered the weird feeling the wand gave me. I went over to my laptop, which sat on the little desk in the corner of the room, and started typing the description of the wand in Google. I stared as the description was bold on my face. A moonstone scepter. It was known to be one of the most powerful things this planet had ever had. I gasped as I realized how much power I held only moments ago. No wonder it hurt to touch. I said to myself as I stared down at my hand, "It is said that the moon goddess is the only one powerful enough to hold such a scepter and to use it properly. She's the rightful owner of this scepter." So, what was it doing at Sebastian's bedside table? I decided to click out of it quickly before Sebastian returned home. I wasn't sure I wanted to know the truth. It's not like I could just ask him about it. It would only anger him anyway. But I couldn't help but wonder if it had anything to do with his scars. While I had my computer open, I decided to do a little more research on the wolf madness. I grabbed my notebook nearby and began taking some small notes. I wasn't sure how long I was researching, but I felt a wave of tiredness after a while. I found it hard to keep my eyes open. Sebastian's POV. Sebastian returned home, and he could already smell Hannah all over the palace. He sighed relief, knowing she was there. He was determined to talk to her about what happened at the hospital. He didn't want her to think he was angry with her or choosing Emily over her. That wasn't the case at all, but with the hurt expression on Hannah's face, he knew she was getting the wrong idea. Caroline greeted him at the door with a curtsy, and she looked a bit worried. He said nothing to her, but he stared at her until she started speaking. Good evening, Your Majesty. Dinner is prepared in the dining hall, she said softly. The Luna Queen hasn't eaten yet. She said she would eat later, but she hasn't come down. She hasn't eaten? Sebastian asked, his voice rising, making Caroline tense. Caroline nodded once, confirming, her body visibly trembling. Without saying anything more, Sebastian rushed past her and towards the grand stairs. Eric was getting wound up wondering why Hannah chose not to eat when she returned home. It wasn't like her to skip a meal. Had they upset her so much that she's starving herself? He barged into their bedroom, his heart racing at a lightning speed. He paused as he saw Hannah bent over her laptop with her eyes closed. He rushed towards her until Eric stopped him. She's sleeping, Eric informed him. She must be exhausted from today. He was right. Hannah was sleeping soundly at her computer. He sighed relief knowing that she was okay. Their conversation would have to wait until the morning. He went to lift her to place her into bed when he saw some familiar words on her laptop screen. He paused as he read the laptop. Wolf madness? He said to his wolf, raising his eyebrows. He scrolled through her computer for a moment, realizing that she was researching ways to cure and tame his wolf madness. He stared at the sleeping woman with admiration filling his mind. A smile tugged at his lips. He couldn't believe what he was seeing in front of him. Then he saw her notebook. She's been researching ways to help us, Eric breathed. Sebastian's POV. She's been researching how to help us? Sebastian repeated. He still couldn't believe what he was seeing in front of him. A smile was tugging at his lips as he stared down at Hannah. She was sleeping soundly at her computer, not knowing that he was there. Eric was howling and basking in her beauty. She seemed even more beautiful to them. He continued to flip through the pages of her notebook, reading through her bullet points and the many ways to calm the anxieties he faces during his wolf madness. She even listed some of the books that she read through. He was guessing she got those books from the library and wanted to keep track of what she already read. She's been at the library a lot, Eric reminded him. With that doctor. Has she been there researching this that whole time? Sebastian asked. He felt a wave of guilt washing over him as he remembered how he reacted when he saw her at the library. He forced her to go home and wouldn't let her utter a single word. She was only there because of him, and he acted like she was a traitor to him. He clutched the notebook tightly in his hands, trying to erase the memories from his mind. Hannah made a small sound through her lips as she yawned. Her eyes fluttered open and landed on him. Narrowing her eyes with confusion crossing her face, she lifted her head. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I should be asking you the same thing," he breathed. His voice sounded harsher than he meant it, but it didn't seem to faze her. She was used to the harshness of his tone. "What is this?" he asked, showing the notebook he was holding. Her eyes shifted to the notebook, and she frowned. "My notebook," she answered, snatching it from his grip. "What gives you the right to read this?" "You're my Luna," he told her, his voice deepening. "That is my right." "Am I not allowed any privacy?" she asked, turning away from him. He grabbed her shoulder, twisting her around forcibly to make her look at him. Her eyes widened, and there was a hidden fear within her features. Her breathing grew shaky, and he realized how he must have looked at her. He closed his eyes and took in a deep breath to calm himself down. He didn't feel like he was going to lose control, but he didn't like her keeping secrets from him, and she knew this. "Why were you researching wolf madness?" he asked, keeping his tone even and calm. "Why do you think?" she asked, meeting his eyes. There was a firmness in her gaze, and he knew she was no longer frightened of him. "Tell me," he ordered. "Because I don't like seeing you in agony," she said without hesitation. "I worry about what will happen the next full moon. I worry for not only my life, but for yours as well. I don't want to see you in pain. I don't like to see your anxieties, Sebastian." "How long have you been researching this?" he asked, lowering his tone. "A few weeks," she answered. "I've been going to the library after work to research. Dr. Davis has been helping me." Her words confirmed his thoughts, and he felt a jab of pain in his chest. He unhanded her shoulder and took a step away from her. How could he have been so stupid? "Why didn't you tell me?" he muttered. She blinked at him a few times, appearing even more confused. "I've tried," she said, "but you wouldn't listen to reason." I tried to tell you that nothing was going on between Dr. Davis and me, and you didn't believe me." Her voice cracked as she choked back tears. "You aren't allowed to see him outside the hospital," he said to her. "You've said that already," she said in return, pressing her lips in a firm line. "For now on, you will only do research with me, understood?" he asked, keeping his gaze locked on hers. She was quiet for a moment as she processed what he was asking. "You want to research wolf madness with me?" she asked, shocked by his order. "The madness affects me. Why shouldn't I be the one to figure out how to stop it?" he asked in return. She nodded slowly. "Yes, of course," she told him. "Tomorrow we will go into the city to find some of these items you listed," he said, pointing to the notebook. She glanced down at her own writing and nodded. "Okay," she agreed. "Oh, and Hannah?" he said before leaving the room. "Don't ever keep something like this from me again. Hannah's POV." I flinched when the door slammed shut as Sebastian left the room. I was holding back the tears that threatened to spill from my eyes. My heart was beating violently in my chest while Nora and I wondered what the hell had just happened. I stared down at the notebook Sebastian was reading, my breath growing heavy and shaky. I had never meant for him to see this, at least not yet. I wanted to do more research and understand the madness a bit more before I came to him with some solutions. But now it seems he wants to do research with me and learn about this together. I should be happy that Sebastian wants this as badly as I do. It meant he was taking a step in the right direction, but I feared none of the steps mentioned will work for him. I feared that if they didn't work, he will grow discouraged and it will force him to lose control. Would he take his anger out on me? I couldn't help but ask myself. He seemed so angry with me already. I felt like I was pushing him in the direction of Emily, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. "Your Majesty?" Caroline said as she poked her head through the door. "Dinner is being served in the dining hall." If I didn't go down to eat, Sebastian would grow suspicious. I smiled my thanks to her and made my way to the dining hall. I was glad that Queen Magnolia wasn't joining us for dinner this evening, and neither was Jack. I didn't trust either of them, or I knew Sebastian didn't trust them either. They've been keeping their distance lately, which makes me worry that they might be up to something. Sebastian was waiting for me by the time I got to the dining hall. We were both served red wine with our meals, and he started eating as soon as I sat down. It was a silent meal filled with inner thoughts. I knew we were both thinking intently about the research done for wolf madness. I wanted to express my concerns, but I knew better than that and kept my mouth closed. Once we finished our meal, the kitchen servants began collecting our dirty dishes. Sebastian was wiping his mouth with his napkin before standing up. "I'm going to the hospital this evening," he announced to me. "Hannah's POV." We left in the morning to go into the city. Sebastian wanted to get an early start because I had to work that afternoon, and he wanted to see Emily at the hospital. As he said her name, I had to stifle a groan. I didn't want him to know that she bothers me. There was a part of me that didn't trust her. Nora had a weird feeling when it came to Emily. I tried to ignore the feeling, but it only seems to grow thicker in my stomach, sinking like lead. We went to the florist's shop first to gather a few flowers that I took note of, one of which was the jasmine flower. It was even more beautiful in person. Sebastian looked awkwardly at me as we were getting the flowers, like he was uncomfortable with the arrangement. "Usually, I would be getting you the flowers," he said hesitantly. I bit my lip to keep myself from laughing. He's never looked so awkward to me before. It's not like I was purchasing the flowers for him. We were getting them together to help with his madness. "Don't laugh at me," he muttered with an eye roll as we left the store. "I'm not laughing," I told him with my most innocent-sounding voice. "Looks like you want to laugh," he pointed out, eyeing me from the corner of his eyes. "No," I lied with a smile. "These flowers aren't for a romantic purpose. They are for your well-being. Like medicine," I reminded him. "No need to feel weird about it." The next store we went to was the perfume shop, where we repurchased the cologne I got him last time. It was still unclear if it was the fumes of the cologne that calmed him or my scent, but either or, it didn't hurt to try it again. Now that he understood what it was for and why I got it the last time, Maybe it would actually work for him. Then we went to a pharmacy to pick up some medicine that helps with chronic migraines and soothes the body. It was something Dr. Davis suggested, but I wasn't going to tell that to Sebastian. We also grabbed some vitamins that will help boost his serotonin and calm his tensions. That's the last of everything on the list for right now, I told him as we stood by his car. And if these don't work, he asked. Then we do more research, I told him. Something is bound to work. He nodded and looked at the watch around his wrist with a frown. We need to get to the hospital, he told me. You're going to be late for work, and Emily has more testing she needs to be done. She doesn't like being alone for those. I had to keep myself from rolling my eyes. I thought about how Emily kicked me from her room the night before, and how Sebastian let it happen. There was an uneasiness in the pit of my stomach. It didn't make sense because of the good times we had this past week together. Now everything felt weird between us. He stared at me for a moment longer, reading my features like he was reading a book. Last night wasn't personal, he told me gently. I met his eyes, surprised by his change of tone. I was worried that she would cause a big enough scene to attract attention. I didn't want you getting in any trouble. I frowned, thinking back to last night. She was yelling loudly, and technically I wasn't allowed in her room. The hospital had to accept the patient's wishes and their visiting lists, especially if they are long-term patients. Considering Nancy was her doctor, she wouldn't waste any opportunity to get me penalized. Could Sebastian have realized that and was only trying to help me? I felt my cheeks reddening as his stare intensified. "What are you thinking about?" he finally asked, tilting his head to the side. I snapped out of my daze and gave him a polite and apologetic smile. "I'm thinking we should get to the hospital," I told him as I slid into the car. He stood there for a moment longer before shaking his head with disbelief and joining me in the car. Lewis greeted us both and then started driving in the direction of the hospital. "Just the person I've been wanting to see," Dr. Davis said as I neared my desk. I had to drop off some paperwork before making my rounds to my patients, and Sebastian was already with Emily. He looked around a bit nervously for a moment, making sure Sebastian wasn't nearby. "He's not here," I assured him with a smile. "He's with Emily. She has some testing this afternoon, and he needs to be there with her during that." He looked relieved and nodded. "Is there something I can help you with, Dr. Davis?" I asked, eyeing him carefully. "Oh, right," he said quickly. "Not particularly, but I got a letter from the head of the medical department in the Blue Moon Pack that they have openings for their postgraduate program. Students attend the Blue Moon Medical Academy and continue their internships at the Blue Moon Hospital. They learn from the best doctors around the kingdom while earning their degrees and securing their futures," Dr. Davis explained. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, not sure where he was going with it. I didn't become one of the best doctors in the kingdom on my own. I became the best doctor because I attended this same school and earned my way to the top. He explained, "Because I'm a former student and doctor of the Blue Moon Hospital, they take my recommendations very seriously." "Okay?" I urged, still unsure of what he was trying to say. "I would like to recommend you for the program," he finally said, a smile spreading across his face. My heart nearly stopped in my chest as he spoke. He handed me a small pamphlet from his white trench coat. My fingers were trembling as I took it from him. I stared down at the pamphlet with an image of the large school spread across the top. Of course, I had heard of this school. Someone who grew up wanting to be a doctor more than anything. I did my research to find out the best way I could make that happen. This school was listed as #1 in the entire kingdom and was a sure way to get me to the top. However, we didn't have much money, and I would never be able to afford the tuition. The Blue Moon Pack was halfway across the kingdom, which was extremely far from the palace. I couldn't just leave to attend this school. What would Sebastian think? Would he be able to go with me? Would he want to? "He's the king. It's his kingdom, regardless of what pack he's in," Nora reminded me. "I'm sure he wouldn't mind going too." "You don't need to decide right now," Dr. Davis said, reading my expression and assessing my silence. "But think about it, okay?" I nodded once. "Yes, I'll think about it." "Thank you," I said as he walked away. Hannah's POV. I kept the pamphlet in the drawer of my desk at the palace. I hadn't brought it up to Sebastian yet because I feared what he would say. Nora was upset with me for lying to him, but I didn't think of it as lying. I just hadn't told him about it, yet. I was planning to at some point, when the timing is right. I still had time before enrollment, so I didn't need to decide right now anyway. So, for right now, the pamphlet will remain in the drawer of my desk until I had the nerve to talk to Sebastian. I stared at myself in the mirror, satisfied with the maroon dress I was wearing. It was a simple, business-casual dress that I got from the boutique that Sebastian had bought. I had my hair tied in a low ponytail and curled into ringlets down my back. Sebastian walked into the room. He was wearing one of his dark suits and had his hair combed out of his face. Of course, he was wearing his mask, which still bothered me, but I made it a point to not say anything about it. He didn't even have to try to look good. He could be wearing a trash bag, and he still looked handsome as ever. It wasn't fair that he kept his good looks hidden behind his mask. I wanted to reach out and grab it off his face, but I knew better than to anger him, especially before the medical banquet we were about to attend. This was my first medical banquet, and some of the top doctors, besides Dr. Davis, were going to be there. I had to make sure my first impression was a good one, and that meant attending it with a very calm Wolf King. "Are you ready?" he asked, staring at me. I nodded and took in a deep breath to try to calm my nerves. "A little nervous," I admitted. "Why?" he asked, raising his eyebrows. It occurred to me that he probably doesn't get nervous easily, being the king and all. He's used to everyone else being nervous around him, though. "I just want to make a good impression," I told him. "You're the Luna Queen. They should be worried about making a good impression with you," he told me, offering his arm. I smiled, though I knew it wasn't going to reach my eyes. If anything, his words made me more nervous. I didn't want everyone to be nervous around me. I didn't want them to see me as the Wolf King's Luna or the Luna Queen. I wanted them to see me as a good doctor and a healer. He softened his gaze and pulled me along with him out of the room. "You're going to be fine," he assured me. I nodded and allowed him to take me down the stairs and towards the front door of the palace. The butler was already opening the door for us and bowing as we made our way past. Louis was already standing by the car out front with the doors open, gesturing us to enter. The banquet was held in a large dining hall in King's City, where the most important events are held. Upon entering, we were greeted with bows and curtsies right away. I smiled nervously as I made eye contact with some of the top doctors that I recognized from books and magazines. I couldn't believe I was in the presence of them. I grew up reading and researching everything about them, and never have dreamt of actually being able to meet them. They were my idols. "Relax," Sebastian muttered from beside me, sensing my tension. I tried to relax my body, but as soon as I did, I began trembling uncontrollably. What was wrong with me? "Hannah, you made it," Dr. Davis said, strolling toward me. He stopped suddenly as soon as he saw Sebastian. His eyes widened, and he cleared his throat. "I'm glad you are both here," he said, keeping his tone professional. Sebastian said nothing. He just tightened his hold around my arm, and I felt my face reddening. I wasn't sure why Sebastian was still so hostile towards Dr. Davis. He knew that Dr. Davis was just helping me research wolf madness, and that there was nothing more going on between us. "There are some people I wanted to introduce you to," Dr. Davis said, motioning for us to follow him. As we made our way through the crowded dining hall, I could already smell the fresh foods being prepared and ready to serve. My stomach growled as I realized I hadn't eaten all day, and I was beginning to become ravenous. Dr. Davis stopped in front of a small group of people, 2 men and a woman who looked relatively middle-aged. "Hannah, this is Dr. Edison, Dr. Lionel, and Dr. Montgomery," Dr. Davis introduced. My eyes widened as I stared at the woman that I have read so much about. Dr. Rachel Montgomery, my #1 idol and the dean of the Blue Moon Medical Academy, not to mention the Luna of the Blue Moon Pack's Alpha, George Montgomery. "Dr. Montgomery," I said as I shook her hand, "I'm a huge fan of yours." She gave me a pleasant smile and bowed her head. "Not as big a fan as I am of yours, Your Majesty," she said to me in return. I felt my face reddening. This was my worry. that they would only see me as the Luna Queen and not as a fellow doctor in training. She turned to Sebastian and bowed her head again. "It's an honor to have you both at our medical banquet," she said, keeping her tone proper. "Hannah is who I was telling you about earlier. I recommended her a few days ago to your program," Dr. Davis said. I felt the color draining from my features at his mention of the program. It felt like there wasn't enough air in the room to breathe. I knew Sebastian was staring at me questionably, but I refused to confirm that by looking up at him. Dr. Montgomery lifted her gaze to meet mine, narrowing her eyes as she assessed my face. "It would be such an honor if you could attend the Blue Moon Medical Academy, Your Majesty. We've heard such great things about your work. You can learn a lot from us, just as we can learn a lot from you as well," she said. I had no words to say. My voice would come out weak if I tried to speak at that moment. Dr. Davis's face fell slightly as he assessed my frozen features, and his eyes shifted over to Sebastian. "I'm assuming you haven't made a decision yet?" he asked, turning his attention back to me. I tried to say, but my words came out as a squeak. "I have not. Enrollment is in a couple of weeks," Dr. Montgomery said. "You have plenty of time to decide on what you want to do, but we would love to have you." "Thank you, ma'am," I said to her. I was glad that my voice appeared much stronger than it had a moment ago. I could feel Sebastian tensing from beside me, clutching my arm tightly to a point where I thought I was going to lose circulation. I tried not to look uncomfortable in front of these doctors, though. "If you'll excuse us," I said to them, trying to keep my tone even. "I think I smell food being brought out, and I'm very hungry." They all chuckled and nodded. "Of course," Dr. Davis said. He was still eyeing me carefully, but he said nothing more as Sebastian pulled me from the group and in the direction of the tables. We walked quietly. I smiled as people bowed to us. I tried not to look too awkward or act like my arm was losing all feeling. "You're hurting me," I whispered, trying to get him to ease some of the tension. "You didn't tell me about the program," he said through gritted teeth. I knew he was trying to keep himself from losing control. "Can we discuss it later?" I asked him. After another squeeze of my arm, he finally released me. He said nothing more to me the rest of the night. Amy's POV. "Father," Liam breathed as Stephen made his way to his bedside. "My boy," Stephen said in return, fake sincerity in his tone. "I can't believe I have to sneak here to see my own son. It was completely unfair of your sister, don't you think?" "I told Liam everything Hannah says about him," Amy said, folding her arms across her chest. "But it seems he didn't believe me and still allows her to see him." "Hannah's my family," Liam said, nervousness in his tone. "Aren't we your family too?" Stephen asked, a fake hurt roaming through his voice. Liam wasn't sure what to say to that either. "Haven't we taken care of you since your mother died?" "Yes," Liam said softly. "And you don't think we'd continue to care for you?" Stephen asked. "Hannah said," he tried to say. "It doesn't matter what Hannah said," Stephen cut him off. "Do you want to see your mom again?" he asked. Liam's eyes widened. "Mom?" Liam asked. "Yes," Stephen breathed. "There's a way you can see her again and soon. But Hannah doesn't want you to know that. You won't be able to see your mom soon if Hannah is always around here," Stephen told him. "Don't you want to see your mom soon?" "Yes," Liam breathed, keeping his eyes locked on Stephen. "Then you know what you have to do, son," Stephen said, lowering himself so he's eye level with Liam. "Take Hannah off your visitors list and add us. Then soon you will see your mom again." Hannah's POV. "How could you not say anything to me about this?" Sebastian roared. We had just returned to the palace from the medical banquet. "I had to find out from that asshole doctor," Sebastian seethed. "He had only just told me about it." I tried to defend myself and keep my voice as strong as I could, but I was visibly shaking in front of him. "Don't lie to me, Hannah," he hissed. "He said he told you about the program days ago." "It wasn't set in stone," I argued. "I told him I was going to think about it." "And did you?" Sebastian asked, slamming his fist on the wooden bar in the living quarters. "Think about it?" "I was going to talk to you when the time was right," I said, trying to keep the tears from burning in my eyes. "When would that time be?" Sebastian asked loudly. "After enrollments? When you were out the door and leaving to live in a new pack?" "Of course not," I said back, offended that he thought so little of me. Then when, Hannah? He shouted, sending a tremble throughout my body. I don't know, I heard myself saying, feeling and sounding defeated. I knew there was nothing I could say to calm him down. He was seething through his teeth. I backed away from him again, about to leave because I couldn't handle any more of this. It was clear he wasn't going to understand, and we both needed to calm down before we furthered this conversation. Don't you dare walk away from me, he hissed, fury rushing through him. His eyes were switching from his dark blue gaze to his scarlet glare. His wolf was threatening to be released. I knew it was only a matter of time before he lost control. I can't do this right now, I said to him through my tear-stained features. I needed to leave. Hannah, he warned through his tightened jaw. I turned away from him quickly and ran from the palace before he said anything more. I went straight to the hospital. I didn't know where else to go, but I knew I couldn't stay around Sebastian. I wanted to see my brother more than anything. Being around a familiar presence always made me feel better. The hospital was quiet because it was so late at night. I knew Nancy would be around somewhere, and I was dreading running into her. I was hoping she was busy with paperwork, and I wouldn't have to face her. However, I felt her presence as soon as I reached Liam's room. Before I had the chance of opening the door, she was standing in front of the door with her arms folded across her chest. Her eyes narrowed in on me, and her lips were pressed in a firm line. "You aren't allowed in there anymore," she told me. Her tone was flat as she spoke. I rolled my eyes, trying to get around her. "I'm not in the mood for your games, Nancy," I muttered, trying to keep her from seeing my tear-stained face. "Not a game," she said, keeping me blocked from the door. "The patient requested that you aren't to enter the room." I frowned and stared at the room number with my brother's name on the door. "That's my brother's room," I told her. "He's my family. I'm allowed in." "He requested that you are taken off the visitors list," she told me, her tone harsh. I felt the walls caving in as she spoke. This had to be a joke or a mistake. Liam wouldn't take me off the visitors list. "I'm not in the mood," I said again, trying once again to get past her. She reached in her white trench coat and pulled out a piece of paper, revealing it to me. It was an updated visitor list with my name crossed off and placed on the Do Not Allow Entrance section. Replacing my name were the names Stephen, Amy, and Naomi. On the bottom of the form was my brother's signature. "That can't be real," I whispered, my voice becoming hoarse. "It's very real," she said. "You know your brother's signature better than anyone. Tell me, does it look like it's forged?" I stared at his signature, speechless. She was right. It was real. She put the form back in her jacket and stared at me for a long while. "You aren't allowed entrance. Leave, now." I couldn't stay any longer, or I would start crying in front of her. That's something I wasn't allowing myself to do. I turned away from her and headed towards the exit. But once I rounded the corner, I couldn't hold myself together any longer. I pressed my back firmly against the wall and slid to the ground, allowing tears to escape my eyes and soak over my features. I sobbed into my lap as I pressed my knees against my chest, holding them together with my arms. At that moment, it felt like my entire world was falling apart. Nora was in agony over Liam, and my heart was aching painfully in my chest. My body trembled uncontrollably, and I thought I was going to pass out from everything that was happening. Soon, a presence appeared before me. It was a comforting presence, and Nora felt almost relieved to have him near us. I didn't know he followed me to the hospital. I was so wrapped up in what was going on that I didn't sense him until he was in front of me. He knelt to the ground before me. It was clear that he was much calmer, and his expression showed nothing but worry. He was about to scoop me up and into his arms, but before he could wrap his arms around me, I wrapped my arms around his neck first and pulled myself close to him. Neither of us could grasp what was happening, but soon my lips were pressed against his, and I was kissing him. Hard and hungrily, Hannah's POV. My lips touched Sebastian's with a hard force, and I hungrily searched his mouth with my tongue. He wrapped his arms around me and pressed me into the wall, allowing me to do as I pleased with his mouth. I could feel the cold plastic of his mask rubbing against my features, and it was almost uncomfortable, but I tried to push the discomfort out of my mind. I knew at any moment that Nancy could walk around the corner and see our embrace, but I didn't care. I almost wanted her to find us. My heart was beating heavily against my chest, and I ignored the evident pain. I traced his bottom lip with my teeth and gave it a playful tug, bringing him further into my mouth. I could feel Nora's tension easing from within me as we were brought closer together. I could feel the heat from his body radiating off mine, making my cheeks flush as he continued to press himself against me, trapping me between the wall and his hardened exterior. His biceps were rippling and made my knees nearly weak. I imagined what his features looked like. That moment I saw him with his mask off during the full moon. His face was so beautiful, and it had me in a trance. I could feel the heat rising throughout my body as the memory resurfaced. I wanted to see him again. I needed to see his face. I reached toward his mask, tracing the outline. I kept my eyes closed tightly and tugged his mask gently, almost lifting it from his face. He stilled immediately. "What the hell are you doing?" He hissed as he jumped away from me, swatting my hand away from his mask, leaving me breathless and confused. I tried to maintain my breath and tried to cool down my features with my hands. My body trembled as I attempted to maintain my composure. I was in heat again, and I was worried I wouldn't be able to control myself. I had to get out of here and get into the ice bath despite Nora's irritation and protest. I tried to say between gasps of breath. I don't know. I felt tears welling in my eyes again as I remembered my previous conversation with Nancy. My heart was so broken, and I didn't know what to do about it. "I'm in so much pain," I whispered as tears fell from my eyes. His gaze softened and he sighed as he stepped closer to me. He wrapped his arms around me and lifted me, cradling me like a baby as I cried into his chest. I don't remember how we got home. He ran so quickly that it felt like we spawned into our bedroom. I might have even fallen asleep as I was pressed against the warmth of his chest. His presence was comforting to my wolf, despite everything we were going through. I didn't even have the chance to tell him what happened at the hospital. I felt so defeated and weakened. I just wanted to sleep and forget this awful day had happened. Sebastian was already gone the next morning. I assumed he was at the hospital already to see Emily. My heart ached even more at the thought of it. There was something wrong, and I couldn't put my finger on it. But Nora felt even more uneasy whenever we thought about Sebastian with Emily. It was clear she didn't like Emily, and I couldn't blame her. Today was my day off, and I wasn't planning on sitting around the palace all day and waiting for Sebastian. "Caroline?" I called for her as I made my way around the palace to search for my handmaiden, who was also becoming my friend. It didn't take long to find her. "Sorry, Your Majesty," she said with a worried gaze. "I was just finishing your laundry. What can I do for you?" "I just wanted to let you know I was leaving for the afternoon," I told her. "I'm going to see my father, so if my husband returns home, just let him know I'll be home later." She stared at me for a moment, a worried expression on her face. "What?" I asked, eyeing her carefully. "I'm sorry for misspeaking, Your Majesty, but is it a good idea to see your father? From the last time he was here," she said, remembering how Sebastian kicked him from the palace. "I have business to take care of," I told her. Liam was more important than my feelings towards my father. I had to get in to see Liam, and if I had to speak with my father to do that, then that's what I'll do. I didn't say that to Caroline, though. I haven't told anyone what was happening at the hospital. I needed to fix this on my own. I assured her I would be fine before I left. Louis was kind enough to take me to my father's house. Naomi wasn't home, thankfully. I wasn't sure how much of her I could take, but unfortunately, Amy was home and so was my father. It was almost like they were waiting for me as I entered the house. My father had a grin on his face, and he folded his arms across his chest as he glared at me. Amy just chuckled as she sat on the couch, pretending she wasn't paying any attention to us. "I don't know what you said to my brother, but you need to fix it. Now," I ordered. "I told him the truth," my father said, his tone deep with agitation. "You can't keep me from my son." "You don't care about him," I argued. "You only care about using him to get to me, and that isn't fair. I'm only trying to look out for his best interest." "His best interest isn't to keep him from his family," my father hissed. Since when do you consider yourself his family? I shot back. I was red in the face with fury. Since I allowed you to live with me when your mother died, he growled. You forced us to live with you, I said in return. We were only children. It doesn't matter. I still took care of you, did I not? Hardly, I said, furrowing my eyebrows together. You spent most of our lives ignoring us. But you are both still alive. Because of me, he stated. I stared at the man who claimed to be my father, but his actions were anything but fatherly. I saw nothing but hatred in his eyes, and that's all I've seen for my entire life. Since we were born as Omegas, he hardly gave us the time of day. I didn't understand why he cared so much about keeping Liam away from me. There is a way you can see Liam again, though, my father said, assessing my face. I shot him a look, not trusting a word that comes out of his mouth, and I knew his next few words were going to be lies. Leave the hospital, he said with a grin. I was startled by his words and narrowed my eyes to focus on him. What? I asked. Quit your job at the hospital. Someone like you shouldn't be practicing medicine, and I'll feel better if you weren't there, he said. Why does it affect you what I do? I asked. Because I won't have you ruining my reputation. As my daughter, everything you do matters. One screw-up and our reputation are destroyed. I won't allow that. Leave the hospital and I'll get Liam to put you back on the visitors list. That isn't fair, I said, my body trembling. Might not be fair, but it's the only deal I'll make. Leave the hospital, he said again, his voice raining with finality. I glanced over at Amy, who was now staring at me with a twinkle of humor in her eyes. You heard him, she muttered, leaning back on the couch. Quit your job and you can have your visiting rights back. After another breath of silence, my father leaned closer to me. Do we have a deal?